Well, hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Hope you are doing well. It's smoking hot here in St. Louis again. It is 97 degrees right now. Where is fall? I had to take Riley out for a quick restroom break, one lap around the lake this afternoon, and it is so hot. I'm sweating. Man, I'm ready for it to be. And Thursday, the high is going to be 60. So thank goodness for that. But it is so hot right now. All right, let's do Mike in the Midwest. You're not here for the weather report, even though I'll probably give it at the beginning of the show because I always do. Here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 115 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons and friends of the Be Our Guest podcast, just like you. Again, I just want to thank you for being here, for supporting the show, for allowing Ricky, Pam, Scott, and myself to talk Disney with you guys 3 to 4 times a week, each and every week. I hope you guys enjoy the shows. I know we put out a lot of content. And I know it can be hard to keep up, but I hope that you enjoy that we have a steady stream of episodes. And I know they're not always blockbusters, but we try to be a consistent friend there in your ears. So if you need somebody there on a Wednesday morning, we're there. If you need somebody there on a Friday to kind of get ready for a weekend, or maybe you don't listen on a Friday morning. Maybe it's something you save until Saturday or Sunday while you're doing the chores around the house over the weekend. You've got something there if you need something to listen to over the weekend. Monday to kick off a work week. If you got to get out the door and get on that train, maybe you do public transportation somewhere. I don't know about that in the Midwest. We all drive our own vehicles, but I think that would be pretty interesting to be on a subway or something like that, a light rail. But I like the idea that if you need something to listen to, we have a fresh new episode for you there on the feed. But I know that, you have a lot of other podcasts that I'm sure you listen to, not just Disney shows. I'm sure you have a lot of other passions. But I do like to know that we're there if you need something to listen to that is fresh and new. And more importantly, that you have a friendly voice there, somebody that I hope that you've, kind of felt that we're friends over the past almost 15 years. That's how I feel about my podcaster friends. I know that I'm a huge fan of Leo Laporte, who's a guy that does technology podcasts. He's about the same age as my dad. So he's about in his mid to late 60s. And I don't know. I listen to his shows because he has a show every Saturday, 2 shows on Sundays. He has a show on Tuesdays. And so I get about 10 hours of his podcast every week. And so you can imagine how I feel like I know him because of the stories he's told, just his side stories over the years. He deals with technology and talks about Apple devices and PCs and the latest viruses and what's going on as far as the merging of technology and politics and things like that, and just how technology changes the world and how we live. But of course, when you're doing a podcast, one of the things I really like about podcasts is that he also discusses his kids, sometimes, and how they've grown up over the course of the times I've listened to his shows, and his wife, and his likes, the kind of cars that he drives, and the stories he had from his childhood growing up in Rhode Island and stuff like that, because now he lives in Northern California. And I hope you kind of feel that way about our show, because we've had a lot of changes. This show started when, like I said, when Mallory, my daughter, my youngest, was 2 months old. She's now a high school cheerleader. So the journey that we have gone through together is pretty amazing. My oldest is now living in Chicago. She was only a, elementary school kid when the show started, and we've had a lot of growth there. And I hope you have in your family as well. Ricky, we're going to get to see this. Ricky's going to become a mom. How about that? That's going to be, well, something. Trust me, I'm having a good time in text messages and phone calls with Ricky, because Ricky has always been one who likes to sleep in and stuff like that. She likes to, I don't know. She likes to do the stuff that I like to do, that I, used to like to do in college, really enjoy my sleep. And I am going to really, really, at the age of 48, enjoy watching Ricky with a baby, because she's going to have such an amazing time and get to have all those moments that are great being a parent. There's nothing like it. But man, I don't know if I could take it at this age of my life. I'm glad those days are behind me. I'm glad that I'm sitting in the football stands watching Mallory cheer. And in 3 years, 4 years, she'll be off to college. We'll be empty nesters. and moving on to that next phase of our life. I know we'll cry and all that stuff, but man, I cannot see chasing a toddler, changing diapers, getting up in the middle of the night, not knowing if it's 3:15 in the morning or 3:15 in the afternoon. I remember those days, right when Mallory came home from the hospital. So, yeah, I'm going to sit back and keep shooting Ricky texts and encouragement and be thankful that we had those times and they have moved on. I'm sure you kind of, yeah, a lot of you guys can probably relate to me. It was a great time and it was something that I think every parent appreciates. And it's one of the best things being a parent is the absolute best thing in the world. There's nothing in the world like it, but it is not for the faint of heart. And Ricky's going to be a great mom. Brian is going to be a great dad. Her husband, Brian, is one of the nicest people I've ever met. But man, their life is going to be just spun around, and it's going to be so fun to watch. And I'm so happy for them. But that little baby is going to be spoiled, and we're going to do the best job we can spoiling that baby as well. Anyway, what's going on around here this week? Like I said, it is really, really hot here in the Be Our Guest Podcast studios in St. Louis, Missouri today, in St. Peters. As we're recording, check this out. It is September 20th, 2022. As of today's show, the temperature currently 97 degrees. The heat index is 102. Fall starts in 48 hours here in the northern hemisphere. Tomorrow's high is supposed to be almost as hot, and then it falls off a cliff on Thursday. The high Thursday is supposed to be 67. So we just have to hold on for 2 hours or for 2 days, not 2 hours. I wish it was 2 hours. 2 days. I just took Riley out to use the restroom right before we started recording this podcast. So she was all settled. One lap around our lake, a quarter of a mile, so she could take her little, stroll and use the restroom. But I mean, I was melting. This is like July hot, and it's it's football season. So this is a little crazy, but cooler weather is going to be here for the weekend for Friday Night Lights. Our football team, high school football team, now ranked number 2 in the state, the Francis Hall Vikings. We travel to an arch rival this Friday night, away game up to Troy to take on the Trojans, I think they are. They are, we used to both be in the largest school category. We have now lost some enrollment, so we're down to 5A instead of 6A. But we're not in the same grouping anymore, but we'll play them this weekend and big game on Friday night. So you'll see some tweets from that. So watch there. Mizzou travels to Auburn. We'll be taking on the Auburn Tigers in an SEC battle on the road. Don't really expect a win there. Auburn is a tough place to win, but if we do, their coach will get fired for sure. So we do have something to play for. So MIZ. What else is going on here? We've got the shows coming out this week. Tomorrow, you'll get some listener questions. Pam and I did that a little bit early. We had a lot of Run Disney in tomorrow's show. For some reason, we just got a lot of Run Disney questions over the last couple of weeks. So we tried to address those. And then on Friday, we do a show talking about tips for capturing the magic on your next Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise Line vacation. Mostly about, taking pictures, but also capturing audio, capturing video, and ways to not just use your device that's in your hand, but that's the most important thing, but to take everything that you have in your bag to remember that trip so that, a week later, a month later, a year later, a decade later, you can go back and relive that trip and remember all the good times that you had. And more importantly, again, thinking about when Mallory was, 3, 4, 5, now that she's 14, almost 15, which is scary, is, we did some audio recordings, video recordings, and you can go back and hear her voice, how she talked, ask her what her favorite ride was in 2011. And also, I mean, just for you guys that are Patreon supporters are usually the most adamant Disney fans. It's really cool to go back and look at things in the background of your videos, attractions that may no longer be there, or they might not be there in that same format. They might be different at this point. Looking at a restaurant, maybe you shoot some video on a past trip at Electric Umbrella. It'd be great to go back and kind of see that because that's long gone. So, the next time you're having lunch at Sunshine Seasons, don't just take a few still pictures, shoot some video, do a panorama of the place. Cause who knows, in a decade, that might be something people talk about. Remember when that Sunshine Seasons was down at the bottom of the Land Pavilion? You just never know nowadays. And it'd just be fun to look back at that. So that's what we talk about on Friday. Of course, this was kind of brought about because, again, I listen to a lot of technology podcasts and It's the new phone season, right? The new iPhones just came out a couple of weeks ago. The new Google phones will come out usually in October-ish, November-ish. So you get like the Google phones, the Samsung phones. So one of the biggest tips I have for everybody is just if you're getting a new phone, take it out, walk around your neighborhood, try every different setting on that phone. Do the panoramic, do the one zoom, the two zoom, the three zoom, the 0.5 zoom. Try the filters, try the action mode in the video, try the whatever you have, the image stabilization, mess with it, mess with it when you walk the dog, when you take the kids for a trip to the park. And then when you get down to Walt Disney World, you have ideas as to what might work. Take portrait shots of trees, and then hey, when I want to take this castle shot, I've done this before. Don't experiment on the trip, experiment at home so that you know exactly what works on your phone or on your camera so that you're ready to rock on your trip. We'll talk about that on Friday. I don't want to do Friday's podcast for you right here. All right, so let's hit today's actually the feedback from last week's show. Last week I kind of got that the topic of the last time from that meme I kept seeing on social media that made me kind of sad because it said there was a day, so it was something to the effect of, a picture of a bunch of kids and just their everyday, just grubby clothes, not baseball uniforms, but just regular old jeans and sneakers and ball caps. And it said something to the effect of, one day you guys all went out to play baseball on the sand lot, and that was the very last time you did that in your life, and you never knew it was that day. And it made me so sad because that is so true. Because we had sandlot baseball games all the time as a kid. And then I can't recall the last one. It just one day, it just never ever happened again. One day we all went out riding on our bikes in the neighborhood as kids over at St. Daniel Lane where I grew up. And then one day that was the last time and it never happened again. And those were the best times of my life. So that was kind of the topic of last week's show. And we got some feedback on that. So let's hit this from the Patreon page. And I love your feedback. So always, please leave your feedback. That just makes my day when I see the feedback to get to read for the next week. John Luther says, and thank you, John, for being a Patreon supporter. I appreciate that so very much. He says, this week wasn't too melancholy at all to my ears. It is good to sit back and reflect periodically. It helps us to appreciate what we have and live in the moment more. I totally know what you mean about everyone else having cooler stuff at home. We had a pinball machine in my basement, which was awesome, but old news to me. Friends loved coming over to play it. I'd be fascinated by my friends' Nintendos, which I didn't have. It's all what we get accustomed to there, I guess. Thanks for another fun podcast. You know what? That is so true. John is exactly right. I mean, if I would have had a pinball machine in my basement or my house when I was growing up, I'd have probably felt the same. But now that you say that, I'd have been like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. That'd have been like silver spoons. The other day I was walking because I haven't been able to run. My knee is still jacked up. I'm trying to get it better, but I'm just walking instead of running. It's killing me. I'm so frustrated. But thank you for all the encouragement on social media, guys. I talk about it on Wednesday show, but you guys mean the world to me by being so kind and supportive because this is really a rough time when I can't run because I'm trying to run and it just will not go, even though I'm not supposed to even be walking right now, but I can't stop. But that's exactly because I saw silver spoons on my iPad while I was walking on the treadmill the other morning. So just kind of scanning through all these old channels, these old retro channels. And in the background, they had, asteroids and a pinball machine and Gorf or something, all these video games. And, it was the kid was living his dream. He had a train. He had all these video games in his house. And it's kind of like, John said he had a pinball machine. But if you have it, you probably don't even appreciate it. But when you go over to your friend's house, like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing in the world. When you mentioned the Nintendo, that struck a chord with me because I never, ever, ever had a Nintendo. It seemed like everybody else in the world in my life had a Nintendo. All my friends had Nintendos, and everybody had Super Mario Brothers, which I never had. Now, I talked about this many, many times on the podcast, on this show, is that um, I had a Commodore 64, and I used that to run a bulletin board system. So what that was, it was kind of like a precursor to the internet. People would call my computer, and you could leave messages, you could upload files, you could download files, you could, play online games, which were not, they were really primitive online games, but I ran the biggest BBS in St. Louis for the Commodore scene for years and years. But because of that, I never had a Nintendo. And here's the rationale as to why my dad would never get me a Nintendo. He said, you're not going to get a Nintendo because with Nintendo, you got to buy cartridges, which are like $50 a game. Here's the deal with Commodore. With a Commodore, because my Commodore obviously had a modem because of the bulletin board, and this is illegal, but I think the statute of limitations has run out by now. I was like in seventh grade, sixth grade, eighth grade, is that you would just download software from all these other bulletin boards that you called around St. Louis. So you go on all these other bulletin boards and you would download California games or winter games or, what have you, Tapper, all these games. And so I had just a library of hundreds and hundreds of games on these 5.25 inch discs that I had in a shoebox. And so I had way more games, probably 10 times more games than any of my friends, that had Nintendo systems. But again, I didn't have a Nintendo. I had the library and I had, don't trust me, I had tons of fun with my Commodore. I really didn't miss it that much. But I was also when kids would on the playground, like, not on the playground, but like in the gym after lunch in middle school, when we just kind of hang out in the gym after lunch and shoot baskets and stuff, everybody would talk about the Nintendo and cheat codes and strategies for Super Mario Brothers and all the games. I was excluded from those conversations because I didn't have a system and I didn't have the games and I didn't play that game. So I do remember that. It was kind of one of those things. I wish I had it, but I mean, I can't complain because I had 10 times more games and had way more fun and flexibility with my Commodore 64. My dad was right on that one, so I'll give it to him. Thanks, John. Let's go to the next comment. It is from Kathy Melchin. Kathy, I appreciate you being a patron. Thank you so much. She said, all I could think of was a book someone gave me when my youngest was born. It was about the last time you held them, the last time you read to them, the last time you had them in a stroller, etc. It was so sad. In my high school job, elevator operator. Now that is a sad book, Kathy. It's like I did see something posted yesterday. Now, again, I guess I'm on social media too much. This is kind of the lesson of this show. Is that I saw another meme posted yesterday, and I follow a lot of athletes and people that are kind of coaches and people that try to motivate athletes. And it was like a meme, and it said something like, "One day there won't be a practice to run your kid to anymore." And it's one of those things that made me like, oh, because, for with Paige, she was always in a sport. And when she played soccer, she played on two or three teams at a time. And then she would play basketball. And then she did cross country. And then she did softball. And Mallory she's an all-star cheer. She's in high school cheer. She takes lessons for tumbling. And it's like we're constantly like taking her here, there. She just texted me. You might have heard my watch go off. I got to Dad, can you take me here to the softball game up at high school just 10 minutes ago? And the thing is, like, always running, always running, always running. So you're, right now in the moment, it's like, oh, can I just get a break? But when I saw that meme yesterday, it like took my breath away, because once that is all over and you're no longer taking your kid to a cheerleading football game, because we see this with Paige. We haven't taken her to a soccer game in 8 years. And at the time it was exhausting. We're just like, God, could we just have a weekend without soccer? And it was exhausting. But man, those were, looking back, those were kind of the good old days. It was a good exhausting. And when those are gone, well, it's like the Ricky thing, right? It's like, we're going to have a lot of free time to maybe go away for the weekend, go to a bed and breakfast and, live like old people. But is that my jam, or is my jam going to high school football games and running my kid everywhere? I don't know. It took my breath away though. Does it make you pause and think if you're a parent? I don't know how I feel about that. That is the blessing of social media, right? It does, there's a lot of bad about social media, but there's also a lot of good, because it made me stop and think. I was like, oh, okay, Mike, appreciate it. Don't be mad because you got to go, do some other thing, 7 times a week. Just appreciate it in the moment, because before you know it, it's going to be over. All right, Sarah Crawford has some feedback here. Thank you for being a Patreon supporter, Sarah. Hey, Mike, I wanted to comment on the locker issue at my daughter's middle school, also where my husband teaches 7th grade science. By the way, I love science teachers. That's awesome. The situation is just the opposite. The kids are not allowed to carry backpacks during the day, only the supplies needed for the next class. They go to their lockers every period to exchange their books, etc. The school's reasoning: backpacks are bulky, taking up too much room in the class, and students are encouraged to plan ahead and be prepared to be focused on the task ahead. Okay, so that's good. I agree with that plan. I like that, because is somebody, when I taught 6th grade, I never allowed backpacks in my classroom because I hated a cluttered classroom. We had lockers in our elementary school. I know a lot of elementary schools don't have lockers. We did. And so nothing, coats, jackets, backpacks, nothing was allowed in my room because I wanted my room to be neat. It might surprise you, but I didn't want clutter because I didn't want to trip over backpacks. I just didn't want, I wanted my room to be efficient and neat and a place to learn. And so I was the same way. Oh, there's Mallory's home. There you go. Riley's excited. Sarah continues. The job that I had in college was painting houses at night for a contractor. I painted at night after the day crew went home so the paint would be dry before they came back the next day. I also was a lifeguard at the university pool and did 5 a.m. swim. Often I would leave my paint job and go to the pool, then to class. I would roll in with wet hair and covered in paint. After several days like this, my professor asked me to stay after class to ask me if I was homeless or needed school assistance. I told her no. I just have to work to put gas in my car. You know what, Sarah? I love that. You were working, you were hustling. That's called the hustle. You were hustling to get an education. Yeah, you worked hard. And I bet you appreciate everything now because you had to work so hard for it. That is exactly the American dream. I mean, I work 7 days a week in my travel agent business, but I'm so fortunate to get to have that position, because I could have a job where I don't work any days of the week. Or I could not have a job. And that would be the terrible thing. So you got to appreciate what you get to do. You got to swim, you got to paint, but I wonder how long that professor was building a backstory in his or her head about why is this girl always wet and why is she covered with paint too? Like, how do those two meet and then coming into my class? That's hilarious. But Sarah, thanks for sharing. That'll be a story I share with my wife tonight at dinner. I love you guys. You guys are the best. Michael Corbett has some feedback for today's show. He says 2 comments. First, my students, junior high, have 5 minutes between classes and many arrive 15 to 20 minutes before school. Does socialization happen? Not really. They're just sitting right next to their friend in commons area, but they're both on their devices. I knew that was where that was going. That's so sad. I don't know. I guess maybe that's it. We all hung out at our lockers like it was our little apartment, but we didn't have cell phones back then. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe now we wouldn't even care because we'd just be texting each other from one side of the school to the other, and it wouldn't even matter. I get that's probably the case. I didn't even think about that. You could just stand next to each other and snap each other or whatever they do. That's funny. Michael continues. Second, I am 10 years older than you and ran 52 half marathons between January 2013 and April 2020. I had knee surgery twice in my right knee and probably need surgery on my left knee. I stopped running in June 2020 when my doctor started talking about knee replacement. I've switched to biking, but I miss running so bad. What makes it worse is that I help with the high school cross country team from my bike. It kills me. Oh my gosh. So yeah, Michael, as sad as it is, I kind of got that talk from my knee specialist, and it is kind of sad. So I'm going to try to bounce back from this, but yeah, my running days are probably not going to last super long, but I'm going to try to finish out this whole year. I'm stubborn like that, but yeah, I will not have a knee replacement. So when it comes to that, I will switch over because I've had my speed skating days for years. I had my hockey days. I played baseball. I mean, these knees have a lot of miles on them, just like yours do. And but I mean, there's also my wife keeps reminding me that she wants to have somebody who can walk in retirement. So we will get there. And running is awesome, but also cheering could be awesome too. What's that? What's that old bird song? For everything there is a season. So maybe my running season is going to be maybe it's almost winter on that season. I don't know, but I appreciate that feedback, Michael. Thank you so much. Looking for Michelle Camber down in South Florida. Hey, Michelle. She says, "Hey, Mike, a memory from my first job was that I met Burt Reynolds and he tipped me $20. I just watched, what was it? Smokey and the Bandit the other day. Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. I was 14 and a cashier at a local buffet. Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson came in one night and I didn't realize it was them. My supervisor and other employees went nuts and fangirled all over them. Before they left, he came up to me, handed me $20 and thanked me for not bothering them. Apparently they were in this area a lot back in the day. Dude, you got to meet the Bandit. Oh, the Bandit. Oh my gosh. I hope he was in the old, was the T-Bird, the car, Trans Am, I think. On the topic of school lockers, the principal at my high school was my good friend's dad. It was a small school, so we were excited every year to get a sneak peek at the other roster, or sorry, at the class roster, and would always hope there were some new cute boys. We volunteered to make the locker assignments for our class and would strategically place any potential new boys near us. Is that legal? I think that's working the numbers there, Michelle. I love it. That's perfect. One more comment on how fast our kids grow up. Samantha is now in New York City working at a school. It is so strange when your kid is off in a big city with a big girl job. She's loving it so far. Knew you could relate with Paige being in Chicago. Michelle, you get it, right? When Michelle's been here with our podcast since day one. I mean, Michelle was with us in 2008. For those that don't know, she's been a supporter of the show since the very, very beginning. And her daughter and my daughter Paige are just about the same age. So they were just little kids when our show started. And that's exactly right. Her little girl is now living in New York City. My little girl is now living in Chicago. And the world is messed up because that happened way, way too fast. Thanks for the feedback, Michelle. How did that happen? Okay, the last piece of feedback today, then we'll get on to the main topic, is from Trisha up in Wisconsin. She says, I feel your pain. I tore my plantar fascia, I'm not a doctor, 5 days ago, immediately placing me on crutches in a boot. Not going to lie, cried a couple times because I'm so active. And like you, I prefer to exercise in the morning. Thankfully, I'm determined and I pivoted to my exercise. I pivoted in my exercise plan. I'm now swimming, which in my opinion is the hardest workout ever, and doing a stationary bike. I bought this kit to convert my regular bike into a stationary one and have been biking in my basement. Now I'm waiting on my MRI next week. It's a slow process, but I'm trying to focus one day at a time. Hope you feel better, Trish. I know that's I don't know how long that takes to heal, but I hope it heals quickly for you because I feel your pain. I clearly remember my last day. It was a mild spring day, just at the end of my 8th grade year. I moved away from my childhood home. Thankfully, I had warning this was coming, but it was hard to leave my friends from the neighborhood. We said we would keep in touch, but it's hard when you can't drive and you live 30 minutes apart. On the upside, it prepared me for going to college where I basically knew no one. It's a good point. That last time you leave your friends, y- you just really don't know how life's going to go. And the good news is you always meet new friends, right? I mean, I lost, you move on from those childhood friends, but then you move to the next phase of your life and you meet the new friends and then you meet the new friends. You go from one phase of life to the next. And I think that's how life is supposed to flow, but it is kind of interesting. So thank you for the great feedback, Trisha, and everybody who took the time. If you have feedback for this week's show or any show, please, please, please drop by patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast. Leave it for next week's show because this is my favorite part of the show. I love making this show about you just as much as it is about our stories here. Okay, today's topic that I'm going to try to maybe bring up some memories for you is I wanted to talk quickly here for about 10 minutes about times I got to spend when I was a kid here in the Midwest with my great grandparents. I don't know if I've really talked about them very much. I've talked about my grandparents quite a bit. I got to spend time with both sets of grandparents as kids. I was very lucky that I had my grandma and my grandpa on both sides of my family until I was about in middle school. And so that was very unusual because a lot of my friends growing up didn't have, maybe had one grandma on one side of the family or one grandpa. I had two grandmas, two grandpas who were still married. It was, the like the ideal situation. On top of that, on my mom's side of the family, so parents, my mom's mom, so my grandma's parents were both still alive. So my great grandparents, they were still alive, and my grandma on my mom's side of the family would take my sister and I many times when my mom was working over to visit her parents, which were my great grandparents, and they lived in a town called Alton, Illinois. Now I don't know if you know about this town, but it's a town it's right on the Mississippi River and it's about 15 minutes from downtown St. Louis, and it was about a 20-minute drive from where we lived in Florissant, Missouri, which is it's in what we call North County. It's a, northern suburb of St. Louis. So about once a week, we would go over to my grandma's house and we'd load it. They had a Caprice Cat Classic, this car. Let me just tell you, this car was a boat. It was huge. It was probably like a late 70s Caprice Classic. I mean, it was huge, bright red. And she would drive us over to Alton, Illinois, and you had to go over the Missouri River first because you had to go over into St. Charles County, where I now live. Then you would go over the Mississippi River over into Illinois. And once you go over the Mississippi River, you're in Alton. And so in Alton, you can look on a map. Alton's a very beautiful kind of old city. So look it up if you're interested in this area, because I'm going to mention a few places you might want to check out if you're ever in this area. Um, but the some of the memories I have from going over there, one is that when I was a kid, the bridge going over the Mississippi River into Alton on Highway 67 was the skinniest, oldest bridge. I think I've talked about this when I talked about playing golf with my other grandpa, my dad's dad. We used to play golf every week we played over in Illinois too at a place called Cloverleaf. And he had a big F-150 that he would drive. And my grandpa was a terrible driver. Love my grandpa, terrible driver. We'd have to go over the same bridge and it was super skinny. It was a 2-lane bridge. And again, this car my grandma would drive was this big Caprice Classic. And it just, I would like the night before, even as like a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 6-year-old, get like start sweating because I would worry about going over that bridge because I felt like it shook. And if a big and 18 wheelers would be coming by on the other side, and it was like, I always knew we are going to end up in the river, but we always made it somehow. But that was the first thing. And also, the town of Alton, Illinois is super hilly because it's built on the bluffs of the Mississippi River. So you have all these bluffs, but so we go over there and we just spend the day with my great grandparents. Their last name was Fenwick. And so everybody called my great grandpa, they called him Finney, Fenny. But his name was Alvin. That's kind of funny. Alvin Fenwick. And he was a great guy. He was a left-handed pitcher because I've done research on him. And I think he lived to be in his 90s. My great grandma, his wife, Florence, she lived to be in her mid to late 90s and died of Alzheimer's when I was in high school. My great grandpa, Alvin, died when I was in 7th grade. So I got to spend many years with them up until I was, in middle and high school. But I just remember, going over their house. They had a big backyard with a garden. They had a detached garage, and we'd just go over there. One of the things I remember over there, it's funny how you have all these memories of weird things when you go back and think about your relatives and times you spent with them. A couple of memories that popped up as I was trying to think about things about them. One thing we always played at their house in their backyard, because they had a big yard, was we always played jarts. You guys remember jarts or yard darts? They were those big darts, like with the big metal points on the end that you would throw into the big like hula hoops that you would spread out about, I don't know, 20 yards apart in the backyard. Those things are illegal now because I guess people always got hit in the head. I mean, if you got hit in the head with a jart, it would probably kill you. But we always played jarts at my great grandparents' house. We always played badminton too. They had a badminton set they would set up, and he had a big old tire swing on an old tree in his backyard. So those were some great memories from their backyard. I also remember in their basement. It's kind of funny because when you're like 6, 7, or 8, I don't know what it was, but basements kind of freaked me out. And so like, he'd be like, okay, go down in the basement. We have, because, they would keep a few toys there from when the grandkids came over. And he'd be like, some of your toys are downstairs. And he had, kind of a semi-finished basement. And I don't know if it was like this where you live, but a lot of houses where we lived had these basements where they had, just kind of like tile put down on the basement floor that had kind of sparkles in it. And, it wasn't like the walls had drywall on them or anything, but they maybe have wood paneling. But they had this picture in the back wall of their basement. I still remember, and I wish I could have taken this when they passed away, but it was a picture of the Mississippi River and it was in a big frame, but you could pull this cord on it and it lit up from the back. And for some reason, that picture like was really spooky and kind of freaked me out. I just remember like my great grandpa Finney would turn that on and it was just really weird, but it was kind of mesmerizing at the same time. So I wish I could kind of go back and find that picture, but I don't even know how to search for it because I don't know what terms I would look for. But it was a great thing. And it would have been cool to have that is kind of a family heirloom. Another thing that we would do, so when we get out and about, and when we went over to Alton, we'd do some certain things. Now that grandpa, so in Alton, the one thing you might know about Alton, a few things, is that there was somebody that was famous that grew up in Alton, and it was a guy named Robert Wadlow, and he was known as the Alton Giant. He was the tallest man in the world for quite a long time, Robert Wadlow. And he was actually friends with my grandpa. So, not my great grandpa, Alvin or Finney, that I'm talking about, but my grandma's husband, Charles, he was friends with him. So my grandpa knew him because they both grew up in Alton together. So one of the things that we would do is there was a statue of the Alton Giant in this park near my great grandpa's house. And he would always take us over to see the Alton Giant statue and always make us stand next to him to see how tall we're getting. Are we getting as tall as the Alton Giant? And he would always crack up that we weren't. My great grandpa was always, he was like a jokester. He was always, trying to make jokes and have fun. So I remember doing that. Another thing that we always did when we went over to my great grandpa's house is that he would take us down. Now, this is one thing I promise you, you have to look this up on Wikipedia because I am not making this up. And it still to this day, I'm a 48-year-old dude, and it still kind of freaks me out because it's still there. There's this thing on the Missouri Bluffs. So if you go into Alton and go across the bridge into Alton, right across the river from Missouri to Illinois, and you go north, there's a road right along the river. I mean, it runs right on the water. It's called the Great River Road, and it takes you all the way right up into northern Illinois, and not northern Illinois, but just up northern parts of like parallels St. Louis on the Illinois side. But if you go up for about 10 minutes on the bluffs, there was this painting that was found by Lewis and Clark on their expedition. And it was this bird, and it's called the Pisaw bird, Piasa, the Pisaw bird. And it was on the bluffs. And so it's carved out of this like caved in part of the bluffs. And they made a little parking lot there. Not really a parking lot, just gravel where you can park your car. And there's a plaque there that explains the legend of the Pisaw bird. And you can see this. Just Google it. It's there. Look at it. This was apparently this bird that was half man and half bird. And it had this man head. So it had this head with like fangs. It had a beard and it had antlers, but it had like a big body of like kind of like a hawk or something, like an eagle. And the legend was that he lived up in the Missouri, up in the Mississippi cliffs, up in these bluffs, and it would swoop down and eat people that were out in the river. It would grab people. So of course my grandpa would tell us that the Pisaw bird was still alive, like they can't catch him, and he was up in those cliffs and we weren't paying attention. The Pisaw bird may swoop down, grab us, and he loved to eat kids from Missouri, because kids from Missouri, I apologize. Riley. Riley. Thank you. Because kids from Missouri apparently tasted better than kids from Illinois because they were a rare species. So my great grandpa loved to have fun with us like that. And I mean, I'm not kidding. This bird is terrifying looking. And to this day, there's a town right there around Alton. It's called Pisaw, Illinois. And the high school is Pisaw High School. And their mascot for their high school is the Pisaw bird. It's crazy. Like that's on their football helmets. But anyway, look it up. It's scary. So my great grandpa used to love taking us to see the Pisaw bird. And that's just kind of how he was. And I still crack up that he did that because that is hilarious. But he also tortured us as kids at the same time. He would also take us to a place called Woody's Chicken, which when I think about this, like it was just a chicken place, but we would always go to Woody's Chicken. It's out of business, of course. Now it's been, almost 40 years, probably 35, 40 years. But the thing I remember about it is that you got the greasiest, like it was just kind of like a Lee's chicken or, just a Kentucky fried chicken. You got like a couple of chicken legs and some fries and crispy stuff down in the box, but it was always served in just like a white box. You would get a white box, but we'd sit there on a table with our Coke and our box of chicken and fries. And grandpa, great grandpa Finney, we just sit there and talk to him. And he had the greatest time getting to hang out with us and spend time with him doing those kind of things. One final thing that we always did with my great grandpa over near Alton, there's a thing called the Brussels Ferry. And so if you go up a little farther on the Great River Road, past the Piesaw Bird, which will be on your right if you're traveling north, don't look. You go up probably about 20 minutes. There's a town called Brussels, Illinois. And over there was a ferry, which was very unusual for where we lived, where you could ride this free ferry over into Calhoun County, Missouri, or yeah, Missouri. And you drive your car right onto this boat. It took about 20 cars at a time. It take you across the Mississippi River into St. Charles County. And one of the things on the other side of the ferry was a Eckert's orchard, and you could pick apples or peaches, whatever was in season. So sometimes great grandpa would take us and grandma, and my grandma, of course, would be with us. And we'd go over there for the day. We'd ride the Brussels ferry across the Mississippi River, pick some apples, come back over on the Brussels ferry on the way back, and maybe get Woody's chicken on the way home. And that was a great day. And it was just fun spending time with my great grandparents, but spending time in Alton, Illinois. There's a lot to do there. There's a casino there now. There's a place where you can see outdoor concerts. There's an amphitheater. There's a lot to do. But if you're ever around St. Louis, check out Alton, Illinois. Just Google it and you'll kind of see. But you got to look up the Piesaw Bird because I want your feedback. Would that freak you out when you're like a 7-year-old kid? Would that freak you out today? I promise you, look at it. It is scary, but I would have done the same thing to my kids with that age. So just because I did it to I've taken Paige over there and I took Mallory over there. The Piesaw Bird, something you got to check out. All right, we're going to get out of here because we're going super long. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for supporting everything we do here on the podcast. We'll get back together again next Tuesday. So until we do that, you guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon. See you later, everybody.